Hi, and welcome to the X22 Report Spotlight. Today we have a returning guest, Peter Schiff. Peter is the chairman of Schiff Gold, CEO and chief global strategist of Euro-Pacific Capital. Peter is one of the few forecasters who accurately predicted the 2007 housing market collapse and subsequent 2008 financial crisis. And Peter is with us today to talk about what is happening in the economy. Peter, welcome back to the X22 Report Spotlight.
Oh, and thanks for having me back.
Hey, thanks for being here. I wanted to start off with the economy. When Obama was leaving office, he said he was handing Trump this strong, incredible economy. When you look at the economy with retail, GDP, employment, has he really actually handed him a strong economy?
No, he has handed him a bubble or maybe a hand grenade that's about to go off here. I mean, this is the biggest bubble I think anybody has ever handed any president. I think that George Bush had the misfortune of inheriting the bubble that we had under Clinton. And of course, the manufacturer of that bubble was more Alan Greenspan than Clinton himself. But the prosperity that we enjoyed under Clinton was phony. And the bubble burst shortly after Bush came to town. And then what happened was the Federal Reserve inflated a larger bubble in the real estate market to numb the pain from the bursting of the dot-com bubble. And that bubble burst while Bush was still in office. And so it looked as if Obama had inherited a mess and made it better. But what he did is he inherited a mess and now made a bigger mess, right? We have the biggest bubble ever. The reckless monetary policy that we pursued under Bernanke and under Yellen is far worse than anything done under Greenspan. And so the prosperity, as bad as it was under Obama, was completely phony. It was all artificial based on inflated asset prices. But it really didn't trickle down to the average guy. I mean, the average American suffered under the Obama presidency. That's why Trump is the current president, because this was just a financial recovery rather than a recovery in the real economy. But this bubble is about to burst. You have inflation now really starting to accelerate. Today, we got the CPI year over year. We have a 2.5% increase. And that's what the government will admit. If they're admitting 2.5%, believe me, it's a lot higher than that. But inflation is rising and the Fed is way behind the curve. And we have so much debt now that they can't raise interest rates to fight inflation. So it's going to keep on getting higher. Wages are going nowhere. So real wages are going to be falling. And eventually you're going to start to see a big uptick in unemployment as this whole mirage vanishes and people see this so-called recovery for what it is.
So Trump wants to try to fix all of this. He wants to spend more money. He wants to borrow to create jobs, to help the infrastructure. Will this actually help the economy by borrowing more money?
No, we can't fix it by going deeper into debt. We can't fix it with more government spending. What we need to do is cut government spending dramatically, and a lot of the debt needs to be defaulted on because it's impossible to repay it. And, because we need higher interest rates. That is a must. We're never going to have a recovery unless we have higher rates. And I'm not talking about the Fed raising rates from 0.5% to 0.75%. We need normal interest rates. We need 5, 6, 7%. We need a interest rate that reflects the true amount of savings and debt in this economy. We need interest rates high enough to encourage people to save money in the bank so that small business can actually get capital that it needs to expand and grow. And so what Trump is talking about is trying to preserve the bubble. We need to let the bubble pop.
I mean, he's also talking about bringing jobs back here and manufacturing at this time when he's out there talking to many different corporations and they're promising to bring all these jobs back to the U.S. I mean, is it really possible to bring all these jobs back when they've been, offshoring them all this time?
No, I mean, not now. Back to what? There's no factories for them to work in. The whole supply chain has been dismantled, and we don't even have workers who are qualified to do the work. So in the long run, can we resurrect our manufacturing industry and bring jobs back? Yeah, we can, but it's going to take a long time. It's not like going to happen during the Trump presidency. I mean, maybe he can lay the foundation to enable that to happen over a longer period of time, but this is going to be a process. But we can't even begin the process until we start dismantling much of government. We need to shrink government so that we can have a lower tax environment. And we need to rebuild our savings so we can make the capital investments that are necessary to bring these jobs back. So we need higher interest rates. We need to allow asset prices to come down. Stock prices have to go down. Real estate prices have to go down. Bond prices have to go down. We have to go through a cleansing recession without the government interfering in the market's attempt to rebalance this economy so that it can have healthy, real economic growth, not just another bubble.
So you talk a lot about the debt. I mean, the United States, we're in about 20 trillion. It's continually moving up. We have about 200 trillion of unfunded liabilities. And, everyone keeps talking about, can we sustain this debt? I mean, how much longer can we go sustaining this debt as it continually moves up? I mean, can we go any further than this?
Well, the reason that the Fed, or one of the reasons that interest rates have been so low, is because we could not sustain the debt were it not for these low interest rates. The debt is so large that servicing it would be impossible if the Fed were to normalize rates, which is why that hasn't happened. And that's why, even though inflation is well above their so-called 2% target, the Fed is not raising rates, or if they do, it's going to be by a tiny amount because they recognize this. But at some point, even a tiny interest rate is going to be too large for our economy to bear. And meanwhile, other costs are going to be going up as a result of all the money that's already been printed. Energy costs are going to go back up. Food costs are going back up. Insurance, taxes. The cost of living is already rising, even without the cost of debt service rising. But as interest rates rise, that is going to crush this economy because of the added cost of servicing the debt. And then I also think if we get any kind of fiscal stimulus under the Trump administration, if we do get a tax cut, if we do get additional government spending on infrastructure or the military or the border, which sends our deficits much higher, that's going to accelerate the collapse, because I don't think the appetite is there, among our foreign creditors to finance all this, to loan us the money. In fact, if anything, if you look at countries like China, like Japan, like Russia, like Saudi Arabia, these have been our biggest lenders. They want their money back. They're shrinking. They're letting their treasury portfolios decline. So the Fed is going to have to step up unless they want interest rates to skyrocket. They're going to have to print a lot of money and buy a lot of bonds. And, that's the beginning of the end.
Now, out in Europe, we see there's many countries out there like the UK, France, Italy, and others who are looking to most likely leave the EU. If these countries start to leave the EU, what type of effect will it have on the U.S., on the dollar? I mean, will this be a ripple effect that will hit the United States?
Well, I don't know. I mean, and at some point there may be a number of states that want to leave the United States. I mean, just about any state would be better off if it were independent, right? Because it would no longer be obligated for its share of the national debt. And it would no longer be obligated to pay the federal income tax or any of these taxes. But, a lot of the European nations think that they'd be better off without the European Union. You know what? Pretty soon Germany might be among them, because the Germans are going to be complaining. Inflation in Germany is now the highest in 4 or 5 years and going higher. And the Germans don't like this. They don't like this kind of monetary policy. So I don't know how things are going to play out in the short run. But I do think the euro is headed higher against the dollar, because I do think that the European Central Bank is going to have to abandon its quantitative easing program much sooner than the markets expect. And I also think that the U.S. is going to go back to an easing when the markets don't expect that at all. I think the Fed is going to be aborting its rate hiking campaign, even in the face of rising inflation. And even if it doesn't abort it, even if it keeps raising rates, it's not going to raise them enough to cause real interest rates to actually rise. I think real interest rates are going to fall. In fact, if you look at real interest rates today, they are lower right now than they were before the first rate hike. So the Fed has not actually moved up rates because they've bumped them up so slowly that they've actually moved further into negative territory on a real basis.
Now, I want to talk about the Fed in a minute, but you mentioned Germany, and that just brought I just thought of the Bundesbank, where they're repatriating the gold, about 300 tons from the Fed, and they just completed that. And they repatriated the gold faster than expected. Why do you think they wanted their gold back, and why did they accelerate the process?
Well, I think they wanted it within their own border just so they have it. I mean, the United States has a checkered history when it comes to gold, right? I mean, we made it illegal for our own citizens to own gold. We also defaulted on our obligations to pay gold because up until 1971, if you were in Germany and you had $35, the Fed owed you an ounce of gold. That gold was on deposit in Fort Knox, but if you brought those $35 to the Federal Reserve, right, they had to give you an ounce of gold. That was our commitment. And then we defaulted on that promise and we paid no gold for our notes. So I think that Germany appreciates the financial predicament the United States is in and doesn't want to leave its gold here. Because what if things get so bad in the United States that we just seize that gold as a national emergency? We just say, we need it, and what is Germany going to do about it? I mean, they're not going to declare war on us. So they would just be, SOL. So I think to not have that problem, they just decided, this is our gold and this is, we need this gold and we're not going to take any chances. So let's bring it back to Germany where we can protect it and know that we own it.
Now, when the Germans did receive the gold, there was some talk about how the labeling on the gold was different, suggesting that maybe the Fed really didn't actually have the gold and they were getting it from other areas.
Well, again, it's the U.S. government that has the gold. Yeah. I don't know that the Fed has gold as a component of its balance sheet. I think pretty much the only thing the Fed has is treasuries and mortgage-backed securities. But the United States government supposedly owns a substantial gold reserve. And the question is, do we actually have all that gold that we claim to have? And, I don't know, right? I mean, I don't know if you could trust the numbers. I'm not sure the last time there was an independent audit of our gold holdings, if there's ever been one.
You wrote an article about the stock market and the U.S. dollar, and you wrote that one is going to crash. Can you just explain what you mean by that?
Well, I mean, the stock market is extremely overvalued. And it will crash eventually unless the dollar crashes instead, right? Because the only way that the Federal Reserve can prevent a substantial decline in the stock market is to, print a lot of money, right? Just make sure that the dollar declines instead of the stock market. But that means that the real value of U.S. stocks is going to come crashing down one way or another. Either it's because the Fed does the right thing and aggressively raises interest rates and allows the stock market to crash, or because the Fed does the wrong thing and doesn't raise rates aggressively or doesn't raise them at all or cuts rates and launches QE4. And so instead of the stock market crashing, the dollar crashes, but that means that the real value of U.S. stocks goes down. And a good way to measure the stock market is in the price of gold. And, let's say right now the Dow is worth, 16 ounces of gold, something like that. I mean, let's see, the Dow is 20,000 and gold is about 1,200. So yeah, about 16 ounces. Well, let's say the stock market gets cut in half, then it's worth 8 ounces of gold. Or, the stock market can stay the same and the price of gold could double. And now it's worth 8 ounces of gold, right? So, in terms of gold, this market's going way down. And believe me, I think it's going a lot lower than 8. I mean, I think we're going to see a unprecedented decline in the gold price of the Dow. I mean, maybe not unprecedented, but maybe as big as the decline in the 1930s or the 1970s when the Dow went down to about 1 ounce of gold, having been as high as 20 ounces of gold at its peak, then having fallen to 1 ounce, which is a huge decline.
I remember watching you and listening to you back in 2006, 2007, and you talked about the economy coming down. And here we are in 2017. And when this economy finally collapses, what is the everyday person going to experience? Because we saw what happened in 2008. What's going to happen with jobs and the credit industry and food? What do you see coming?
Well, I think you're going to see a substantial increase in the cost of living. I mean, that's coming. So Americans are really going to feel this in a way that they haven't in the past. It's not just, the value of their house going down. It's going to be the cost of heating the house going up, the electric bill, of making repairs, of paying your homeowner's insurance. I mean, everything is going to get more expensive. And this is going to be a big problem for average Americans, for those who have jobs, for those who are retired and trying to live off some kind of a fixed income. This is going to be a very disruptive economic downturn. It is going to deliver a substantial decline in the standard of living of the vast majority of Americans in a way that we haven't experienced before.
So when you say the increase of cost of living, I mean, you're talking about a couple dollars, or are you talking about prices of like bread going up to $30, $40, $50?
Well, I don't know about that. Would be hyperinflation, but I could see that even under a better case scenario, I can see over a period of a few short years, the cost of living rising 50 to 100% as far as, your basic necessities, food, energy, stuff like that, and, the price of goods that, might be on the shelves in Walmart, right? The things that we import, whether it's because we impose tariffs and help impose this hardship on ourselves, or just because the dollar falls significantly, so that the import prices go up. But import prices, if they rise by 50% or 100% over a period of a few years, that is a substantial increase in the cost of those products.
So what will the Fed do at this point when things start to deteriorate in the economy? What actions do they have?
Well, I think at first they'll just throw gasoline on the fire because that's all they know, right? They will respond to the weakening economy by printing more money, but that's just going to make things worse. But at some point, hopefully they'll get religion. It probably won't be Janet Yellen. Let's see who Trump appoints to replace her. But if we get the right kind of guy, maybe we'll do the right thing. But, doing the right thing is going to be very problematic, very painful, very difficult politically. It never is. I mean, swallowing bitter tasting medicine is not going to be popular, with the people who are asked to swallow it. Even if they're promised that eventually it's going to work, nobody knows that for sure. All they know is, they don't want this bad taste in their mouth right now based on the promise that maybe in the long run, they'll be better.
There are many individuals out there where they're saying that the dollar will no longer be the world reserve currency anymore. Do you see a currency that will replace the dollar? Some people are saying the SDR.
No, I don't see another currency. I think that the world was foolish to have made the dollar the reserve in the first place. I mean, gold should be the reserve. You don't want to make another irredeemable fiat currency the reserve for another irredeemable fiat currency. It's like having no reserve at all. We need to have a real monetary system, which means we need actual money, not just these fake money substitutes. So I don't think that there is another currency that will replace the dollar, nor do I think there should be a currency to replace the dollar. I think reserves should be gold, and paper currency should be backed by gold, and that's it. And no one country should have some kind of special privilege to be able to write checks that nobody ever cashes. I mean, we've been able to run these massive trade deficits year after year after year because we've had the reserve currency. And we shouldn't have been able to do that. And yes, it was beneficial in the short run because we got to live beyond our means, but it allowed our economy to evolve in a way that is very unhealthy in the long run. I mean, we are going to suffer dramatically for all the past benefits that we had as a result of being the issuer of the reserve currency. When we can no longer do that, when we can no longer pay for our imports with printing press, when we need to export to pay for our imports, I mean, this is going to be a massive collapse.
Peter, thank you very much for being on the X22 Report Spotlight. Once again, how can people see your work?
Well, I do my own podcast. They can listen to them on schiffradio.com is the website. They can also hear them on my YouTube channel. Just look for Peter Schiff and I put them up on YouTube as well. People should go to my company website for Euro-Pacific Capital, europac.com, also schiffgold.com. I put up a lot of commentary there. People should also be investing with me if you want to take advantage of these trends, if you want to profit from what's going to happen. When you see things in advance, I mean, if you see the situation where the crowd has got it wrong, whether we, like the .com bubble, or we profited from the subprime market when that burst in the housing market, when you see a trade where everybody is wrong, the consensus is wrong, there's a lot of money to be made. when you bet against that trade. And I think the profits are going to be huge for the people who actually understand what's going to happen and have their money in the right countries and the right assets. And so people can, talk to my representatives at Europe Pacific Capital. And then what everybody should do who's listening to this, everybody should own some gold. And the easiest way to do that, go to a website, goldmoney.com, right? Goldmoney.com, buy yourself some gold using that website. Basically, you pay 0.5% over spot. Best deal you're going to find. You can take physical delivery whenever you want. But in the meantime, they'll give you a free debit card. You can spend your gold the same way you would spend your dollars that were sitting in a savings account. And more merchants are going to be signing up over time onto this platform. It's an e-commerce platform using gold. It's like a PayPal with gold. And I think a lot of merchants, as inflation really heats up, not only here, but all around the world, people are going to want to get paid in gold. They're going to want to invoice their customers. They're going to want to get gold. And so that's what's ultimately going to happen here. This is going to be commerce, and people will be able to literally opt out of the banking system using gold money, put themselves on a gold standard. You can earn in gold. You can spend in gold. You can save in gold. You can just get out of the banking system, and then you're not going to have to get clobbered with this inflation tax. So goldmoney.com is the website, and just learn about it, open up an account.
Peter, once again, thank you very much for being on the Spotlight.
Hey, my pleasure.